Morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Business Bitesize. I'm Will Abbott, and I'm head of the business advisory team at Randall in Payne. And this week, I want to talk about what I consider to be the most important thing in your business, the one thing that you really do need to get right. It impacts your culture, it impacts your operations, it impacts what you do every day, and it is certainly the one thing that will help you win in the marketplace. And that thing is competitive advantage. So I come across this a lot. I think lots of people have a competitive advantage that they promise, but actually they believe in their own minds that their customers are buying for a different reason, and therefore they get a confused message, and the customers get confused. They get confused about their market segment, so on and so forth. So how does competitive advantage work? So for me, it sits here. As I said, it's the most important thing, and it's really where you start with your business. How are we going to win in the marketplace? So that is our competitive advantage, and we should be playing to our strengths. We should work out where we can deliver value that other people can't, and that will help us to identify what our competitive advantage is. So this is what we're going to promise our customers, and once we know what that is, that will then determine our marketing strategy, which of course is how we make the promise, go out into the marketplace, what we promise to people. And ultimately it drives our operations. So how we run our business should be very much dependent on what our competitive advantage is set out to be. So if we're going to be a low cost operator, that's a completely different operation to delivering fantastic customer service, because like it or not, customer service has a cost. So it's very, very hard to provide fantastic customer service and be a low cost operator. And there's many examples of that. We think about the airlines, or we think about the grocery business, the supermarkets. So we need to be clear on this. And I think what I come across very often is this confusion. So I think often maybe our marketing is not strong enough. So we believe that customers want fantastic customer service. We believe they want us to be proactive and all those things. So those are the things that we promise to do. But when we go out into the marketplace against competitors, we find that actually our product isn't very well differentiated. Everybody else is offering and promising the same thing. And so that leaves the customer with only one thing to choose between us. The only differentiator they can see is the price. So they will choose the price, because why would you pay more for what you perceive to be an identical product? So when that happens a number of times, we then become convinced that the customer is buying on price, because they are, but we become convinced that that's the only thing that they're looking for, low price. And it's simply because we're failing to differentiate our product well enough. And so we still make the promise, though. We still promise because that's what everybody else is promising. But our operation strategy is then in conflict, because we're trying now to deliver low cost. So we don't do the things that we promised, because service has a cost. So we don't offer those extra services. We don't offer those things over and above. And of course, that impacts how we win new business. It impacts the margins that we make, and so on and so forth. So we get this conflict. So for me, really understanding what your competitive advantage is and what your strengths are, and then being true to that is what's really important. So if you promise fantastic customer service, you do have to deliver on it, and that has a cost associated with it, as I said. So another question that comes up with this then is, well, if everybody is promising fantastic customer service, how do I differentiate myself? And I think what I've learned from working with many, many businesses is it is actually quite hard to be different in that promise stage, in the marketing stage. There are things that you can do, but actually the way you win with your competitive advantage is by doing what you say, and customers will get to understand that you do that. You will build a reputation for delivering on what you promise, whereas other competitors will be promising things and not delivering. So it will take time, but if you are authentic to your competitive advantage and deliver on it, that is how you start to stand out in the marketplace. And of course, there's things you can do with marketing. So we can use customer testimonials and reviews. We can use case studies. We can use all these things to demonstrate that you do what you say you will. But actually, ultimately, it's actually delivering on that pays. And again, this is where we end up with a problem. If we promise one thing and believe that the customer is buying only on price, then we cut our operations to deliver a low-cost alternative, and this confused the market. So we end up not delivering what we promise. I think the other thing is also important to remember is that low cost is a very, very successful strategy. There are plenty of low cost operators. I've already talked about the airlines. I've mentioned the supermarkets. We know it's possible to be a low cost operator. If that's what you want to be, then you can definitely succeed at that. But you shouldn't be promising anything else. Most of us would, I think, prefer to be in a different market because, again, low cost means high volume generally, and you need a lot of resource to be really successful as a low cost operator. So it's hard to win there, but it definitely is a successful strategy if you can make it work. So as I said, it comes back to this. I think it impacts so many areas of the business, and I think sometimes it's tricky to understand. We need to spend the time thinking it through. We need to understand what our strengths are and how we can turn those into an advantage. We need then to make the promise, and most importantly, we need to deliver on the promise. So if we can make that promise, deliver on the promise, we will definitely have a much more successful business. We run our advice clinic. So again, if this is of interest to you, you think you're uncertain about what your competitive advantage is, then a 30-minute advice clinic, please get in contact with us and set one of those up. I will talk through this with you and how you can start to think about developing your competitive advantage and what it is. The first point is to try and identify what it is, and we can certainly help you with that in one of our 30-minute advice clinics. So please do get in contact. So again, thanks for listening to me. I'm Will Abbott. I'm head of the business advisory team at Roundel & Payne, and I will be doing these business bite-sized sessions every week. So look forward to catching up with you next week, where I can share a few more tips and insights. Thanks ever so much for listening.